Greg built a modest wooden bridge over Whisper Creek, he intended it as a quiet invitation to the creatures of the forest. A simple, rustic passageway blending seamlessly with its surroundings. He had no idea this humble structure would change his life. After installing a trail camera, he was stunned by the discovery. A mother bobcat and her two playful kittens had begun crossing the bridge daily, captivating him with their quiet routines and wild beauty. Then, suddenly, the bobcats disappeared. Days stretched into anxious weeks as Greg grappled with an unsettling question. Had he inadvertently brought danger to the family he'd grown to love? This is the true story of an alliance between a man and the bobcats who became his protectors, quietly guarding him from an unseen threat. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The woods behind Greg's house in Lynnfield, Massachusetts, were more than just a collection of trees. They were a separate world, a wild, breathing entity that began where his manicured lawn ended. For years, he had looked out his kitchen window, a mug of coffee warming his hands, and felt the pull of that untamed space. It was a tapestry of ancient oaks, slender maples, and dense undergrowth, stitched together with threads of birdsong and the rustle of unseen creatures. A small, determined creek, which he affectionately called Whisper Creek, carved a meandering path through the forest floor, marking a natural yet inconvenient boundary. Greg, a retired architect in his late 60s with a quiet demeanor and hands that were still nimble and creative, had spent the better part of his life designing structures that imposed order on the landscape. Now in the autumn of his years, he felt an increasing desire to do the opposite, to build something that didn't conquer nature, but deferred to it. He wanted a way to cross Whisper Creek, to step from his world into its, without disturbing the sanctity of the place. The idea for the bridge came to him one crisp October morning. It wouldn't be a grand affair of steel and concrete, but a simple rustic structure of wood, something that looked as if it had grown there. He spent a week sketching designs, his old professional habits merging with his new, more organic purpose. He chose sturdy cedar for its resilience against the New England weather, and began the work himself. The project became his meditation. The scent of sawdust mingled with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. The rhythmic rasp of his handplane and the solid thud of the mallet were the only sounds that broke the woodland's peace. When it was finished, the bridge was a thing of simple beauty. It arched gracefully over Whisper Creek, its handrails smooth and inviting, its planks settling into the landscape as if they had always been there. It was more than a crossing. It was an invitation. Curiosity, the engine of so many great discoveries, began to hum within him. Who or what would accept his invitation? He wanted to know about the secret lives of the forest, the comings and goings that happened under the cloak of darkness or in the fleeting moments of twilight. The next day, he drove into town and purchased a trail camera. He mounted it on an old oak tree, its lens aimed squarely at the entrance to his new bridge. He felt a thrill of anticipation, the same feeling he used to get as a boy setting up a tent in the backyard, waiting for the magic of the night to unfold. The first few days of footage were a charming, if predictable, parade of woodland locals. A portly raccoon, its masked face looking directly into the camera with comical surprise, ambled across one night. A family of white-tailed deer, graceful and cautious, picked their way over the planks at dawn, their breath misting in the cool air. Squirrels, in their frantic, endless pursuit of acorns, treated the bridge like their personal highway. Greg would download the images each morning, smiling at the silent stories they told. The bridge was a success. It was being used. Then, one Monday morning, everything changed. As he scrolled through the night's captures, he stopped, his breath catching in his throat. There, bathed in the ethereal gray-green light of the infrared camera, was a creature of breathtaking wildness. It was a bobcat. The animal was poised at the edge of the bridge, one paw lifted, its tufted ears erect and alert. Its coat was a mesmerizing pattern of spots and stripes, a perfect camouflage of tawny brown, gray, and black. But it was the eyes that held him captive, luminous, intelligent, and utterly untamed. They seemed to hold the very essence of the forest. Greg leaned closer to the screen, his heart thumping. The bobcat took a deliberate, silent step onto the bridge, its movements a study in fluid power. And then, following behind her, two smaller versions of herself tumbled into view. Kittens. They were clumsy and playful, batting at each other and their mother's switching tail. One pounced on a drifting leaf, attacking it with mock ferocity, while the other tried to climb the handrail, lost its footing, and rolled onto its back in a fluffy heap. The mother, patient and watchful, nudged them along. Greg watched, utterly mesmerized, as the small family made their way across the bridge and disappeared into the woods on the other side. He replayed the short video clip again and again, a wide, incredulous smile spreading across his face. He felt like he had been given a secret password, granted access to a hidden club. He decided to name the mother Bobcat Marble for the beautiful, intricate patterns of her coat that reminded him of polished stone. For the next 3 weeks, Marble and her kittens became the protagonists of his morning ritual. They were remarkably consistent, crossing the bridge from the deeper woods into the strip of forest bordering his property shortly after dusk, and returning just before sunrise. Greg's trail camera became his window into their world. He watched the kittens grow, their playful tumbles becoming more coordinated, their mock hunts more skillful. He saw Marble's patient teaching, her gentle nudges and occasional stern glances. She would often pause in the middle of the bridge, lifting her head to scent the air, a silent guardian ensuring their passage was safe. Greg grew protective of his wild tenants. He found himself worrying about them during storms, hoping they had found a dry, warm place to shelter. He never tried to approach them or leave food out. He understood the importance of keeping them wild. His role was that of a silent, respectful observer, a chronicler of their quiet daily drama. The bridge was their stage, and he was their sole captivated audience. The simple wooden structure had become a conduit, not just for the animals, but for a profound sense of connection that flowed from the wild heart of the forest directly into his own. The abrupt silence was more jarring than any noise. For 23 consecutive days, Greg's morning had begun with the quiet thrill of watching Marble and her kittens. Then, on the 24th day, there was nothing. The trail camera's memory card was filled with the usual suspects: a skittish fox, a doe, and her fawn, the ever-present squirrels. But of the bobcats, there was no sign. Not a single frame. They probably just found a new route, he told himself, trying to quell a rising tide of unease. Animals were creatures of opportunity, not habit. It was foolish to expect them to adhere to a human-made schedule. But the next morning, the result was the same. And the next. The emptiness on the screen began to feel like a physical presence, a void where the magic had been. Greg found himself checking the camera's live feed on his computer throughout the day, a futile act he knew was irrational. The bobcats were nocturnal. Still, he watched the empty bridge, the sun-dappled leaves, the silent creek, hoping for a flicker of movement, a ghost of tawny fur. By the 5th day, His casual concern had curdled into a heavy, persistent anxiety. The woods, once a source of peace, now seemed to hold a worrying secret. He re-watched the old footage, poring over the images of Marble and her kittens as if searching for a clue he might have missed. He saw her maternal devotion, the way she would groom her kittens with a rough tongue, the constant vigilance in her golden eyes. He saw their innocent play, their complete trust in her protection. Where had they gone? His mind, a workshop accustomed to solving structural problems, began constructing worst-case scenarios. Had they fallen prey to a larger predator, like a coyote? Had one of the kittens been injured, forcing Marble to find a new, safer territory? Or, the thought that twisted his gut the most, had they encountered a human threat? A speeding car on the nearby road? A trap set by someone less enchanted by their presence? Linfield was a quiet town, but it wasn't immune to the conflicts that arose when human and animal worlds overlapped. The silence stretched into a week. The joy he had taken in the bridge soured into something akin to regret. Had he made a mistake? Had his well-intentioned project inadvertently exposed this beautiful family to danger? The bridge, which had felt like a handshake with the wild, now seemed like a betrayal. He walked out to it, the wood cool and solid beneath his hands. He looked across Whisper Creek into the dense woods, as if he could will them to appear. But the forest remained silent, impassive, keeping its secrets locked away. Sleep became fitful. He'd wake in the dead of night. The image of Marble's luminous eyes burned into his mind and pad to the kitchen window, staring out at the dark, impenetrable wall of trees. The unknown was a heavy blanket, smothering the peace he had so carefully cultivated in his retirement. He missed them. He missed the simple, profound knowledge that they were out there, living their wild lives, and that he was privileged enough to witness a small part of it. The absence of the Bobcats had left a hole not just in his daily routine, but in his heart. On the 10th day of their absence, Greg couldn't stand it any longer. The passive waiting was gnawing at him. He had to do something, even if it was just to confirm his fears. He pulled on a pair of sturdy boots, a canvas jacket, and decided to venture out, not into the deep woods across the creek, but into the thick, tangled strip of wilderness at the edge of his own property. It was a long shot, but it was the last place he had seen them head each morning on the camera. He had to know. With a heavy heart and a faint, desperate flicker of hope, he stepped off his manicured lawn and into the untamed world that began just a few feet from his back door. The undergrowth was thicker than he'd anticipated. Thorny vines snagged at his jacket, and fallen branches, hidden beneath a carpet of damp leaves, shifted under his weight. The air was cool and smelled of rich soil and decaying wood. It was a world away from his neat, orderly backyard. Here, nature was in charge, chaotic and beautifully indifferent to human design. Greg moved slowly, methodically, his eyes scanning the ground for any sign of passage. A paw print in a patch of mud, a strand of fur caught on a branch. He felt like an intruder, his crunching footsteps a clumsy intrusion into the quiet symphony of the woods. He pushed aside a curtain of low-hanging pine boughs and stopped. Before him was a massive ancient oak that had been toppled in a storm years ago. Its colossal root ball, ripped from the earth, stood on its side like a gnarled earthen wall, creating a natural cavern beneath the trunk. The entrance to the hollow was dark and deep, shielded by a thicket of wild raspberry bushes. It was the kind of place that screamed shelter. His heart began to beat a little faster. He took a cautious step closer, his senses on high alert. He remembered reading that a mother bobcat would move her den several times to protect her kittens from predators and parasites. Could it be? He didn't dare get too close, knowing that disturbing a den would be the worst thing he could do. Instead, he circled around, keeping a respectful distance, looking for any confirming evidence. And then he saw it. A small, downy feather, likely from a blue jay, lay near the entrance. And next to it, almost invisible against the dirt, was a single perfect paw print, no bigger than a silver dollar. A kitten's print. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees washed over him. They were here. They were safe. Marble hadn't abandoned his woods. She had moved deeper in, choosing his property, his sanctuary, as the place to raise her young. She had assessed the landscape, the creek, the cover of the woods, the quiet of his backyard, and deemed it safe. The realization was humbling. She hadn't just crossed his bridge. She had accepted his unspoken offer of peace. He backed away as silently as he had come, a huge weight lifting from his shoulders. Back in the house, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He couldn't use the trail camera near the den. That would be an unforgivable intrusion. But he could monitor from a distance. He repositioned the camera, aiming it not at the bridge, but at the wider expanse of his backyard that bordered the woods. He zoomed it in as far as it would go, hoping to catch a glimpse of them from afar. His patience was rewarded a few days later. In the soft light of late afternoon, a flicker of movement at the edge of the screen caught his eye. It was Marble. She emerged from the woods with the same silent, deliberate grace he remembered. But this time, she was on a mission. Her body was low to the ground, her gaze fixed, a portrait of lethal focus. She stalked through the tall grass at the very edge of his lawn, each step placed with surgical precision. Greg watched, holding his breath as she froze, her body coiling like a spring. Then, in a blur of tawny fur, she pounced. It was over in an instant. She rose with a small gray creature dangling from her mouth. From the long, hairless tail, Greg recognized it immediately. A white-footed mouse. He watched as she carried her prize back toward the den, disappearing into the shadows to feed her hungry kittens. Greg felt a surge of pride, as if he were watching one of his own children succeed. But another thought began to surface, a memory from a town hall meeting or a local news article, something about mice and the dangers they carried. This wasn't just any mouse. The white-footed mouse, he recalled with a dawning sense of clarity, was the primary carrier for the black-legged ticks that transmit Lyme disease. A shiver, entirely unrelated to the autumn chill, ran down his spine. Last summer, his next-door neighbor's daughter, a vibrant college athlete, had been struck down by a debilitating case of Lyme disease. He remembered her parents' anguish, the months of fatigue, joint pain, and neurological symptoms she had endured. The threat wasn't abstract. It was real. And it was right here in their leafy, idyllic corner of Massachusetts. He had always been careful, of course. He did tick checks after gardening and tucked his pants into his socks when he ventured near the woods. But the sheer number of mice he'd seen scurrying around his shed and stone walls now seemed ominous. He had been living on the front lines of a silent epidemic, completely unaware of the risk. He sat back in his chair, the trail cam footage still playing on a loop on his monitor. He watched Marble's perfect, efficient hunt again. That single, swift pounce wasn't just an act of survival for her family. It was an act of protection for his. A new and profound understanding began to settle over him. He had been so worried about the bobcat's safety, feeling a paternalistic responsibility for them. He had seen himself as their benefactor, the kind man who had built them a bridge. But he had it all wrong. The relationship wasn't one-sided. In her own wild way, Marble was protecting him too. He had invited her in, and she was quietly, diligently standing guard. The revelation sent Greg on a new mission. He spent the next morning not watching his camera, but on his computer, diving into a rabbit hole of ecological research. He typed bobcats and Lyme disease into the search bar, and a world of information unfolded before him. He learned about the intricate web of predator-prey relationships and how their balance or imbalance directly affected human health. He read about a phenomenon called the dilution effect. The science was fascinating. In a healthy, diverse ecosystem with a robust population of predators like bobcats and foxes, the number of small, disease-carrying mammals like white-footed mice is kept in check. Ticks have fewer infected hosts to feed on, and so the prevalence of the Lyme-causing bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, is diluted within the tick population. Conversely, in fragmented habitats where top predators have been eliminated, mice populations explode, and the risk of Lyme disease skyrockets. It was a perfect, elegant system, a form of natural public health management that had been operating for millennia. And he, Greg, was now living in the middle of a case study. Wanting to confirm what he was reading, he looked up the number for Linfield Animal Control. A friendly, knowledgeable officer named Dave answered the phone. Greg explained his situation, his voice filled with a newfound excitement. The bridge, the trail camera, the disappearance, the discovery of the den, and finally, the video of Marble hunting the mouse. "Well, I'll be," Dave said, a warm chuckle in his voice. "You've got yourself a front row seat to one of nature's best shows, sir, and you've hit the nail on the head about the Lyme disease connection." Dave went on to explain it in layman's terms, his words confirming everything Greg had read. "We get calls sometimes from folks who are nervous about seeing a bobcat," he said. "They worry about their pets or their kids, and we always try to educate them. A bobcat wants nothing to do with you. They are incredibly shy. What they do want is a healthy diet of squirrels, rabbits, and especially mice. We consider them one of our greatest allies in managing the tick population. Every mouse a bobcat takes out of the ecosystem is dozens, maybe hundreds, of potentially infected ticks that won't be latching onto people or pets." Greg felt a swell of vindication. "So, by having her den on my property, I'm actually safer?" "In a way, yes," Dave confirmed. "She's created a zone of protection around her den. She'll be actively hunting in that area, significantly reducing the number of infected mice. You've done her a favor by providing a safe, quiet space, and she's returning that favor in a way she'll never understand. It's a perfect example of coexistence. You leave her be, and she'll help keep you safe. You're a lucky man, Greg." After hanging up the phone, Greg walked to his kitchen window and looked out at the woods. Everything looked different now, imbued with a deeper meaning. The rustling leaves weren't just the wind. They were the sound of a complex, interconnected world at work. The trees weren't just scenery. They were a habitat, a shelter, a pantry. His backyard wasn't just his property. It was a shared space, a frontier where two worlds met and, against all odds, had found a way to help each other. He thought back to his initial impulse to build the bridge. It had been a simple, almost selfish desire to connect with the woods. He had never imagined the profound, reciprocal nature of that connection. He had worried about the bobcats' well-being, feeling a sense of responsibility for them. Now he understood that the responsibility flowed both ways. In creating a small haven for Marble, he had unknowingly invited a guardian into his life. She was the wild, silent protector of his home, a furry, tuft-eared angel of public health. As the days turned into weeks, Greg settled into a new routine of respectful observation. He would occasionally catch a glimpse of the kittens, bigger now, venturing out from the den to explore under Marble's watchful eye. He saw them practicing their pouncing skills on blades of grass and chasing butterflies, their youthful energy a joyous sight. He never approached. He simply watched from his window, his heart full. One evening, as dusk was painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, he saw the family emerge and head towards the bridge. It was the first time they had used it since he discovered the den. Marble led the way, as always, confident and poised. The kittens, no longer clumsy toddlers but lanky adolescents, followed close behind. They paused in the middle of the bridge, and for a moment, Marble looked back, not at him, but in the general direction of the house. It was probably a coincidence, a trick of the light. But in that moment, Greg felt a sense of acknowledgement, of a shared understanding that transcended species. It was a silent thank you for the sanctuary, for the peace. And Greg sent his own silent thank you back to her. Thank you for choosing my woods. Thank you for keeping us safe. He looked at the simple wooden bridge he had built with his own two hands. It had started as a path into the forest, a way for him to access the wild. But it had become so much more than that. It was a symbol of a bond he never expected, a testament to the fact that the most profound connections are often the ones we don't seek, but that find us when we simply open a door or build a bridge and wait to see who crosses. It hadn't just led him into the wild. It had brought the very heart of the wild, in all its beauty and protective power, right home to him.